With that down, let's move on to our third main topic today. And our third main topic today gets submitted to us by Segis Ramierez, who writes, "Hello, John and team. There's been a lot of talk recently about who the next Bond could be, and even if the character could be a woman moving forward. Just wondering if you saw the producer say she just can't ever see Bond being female. What do you guys think about her comments?" All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, Segis. And the only reason I knew how to pronounce that name is because I went to school with a guy named Segis. Segis Garcia. If you're watching, Segis, how you doing, brother? Anyway, yes, Barbara Broccoli, who, by the way, I always just called her name Barbara Broccoli. Is it Barbara Broccoli?
Broccoli.
It is pronounced broccoli.
The family actually had something to do with broccoli itself.
I actually always thought it was broccoli, but there you go. Broccoli it is. Anyway, Barbara Broccoli weighed in on this whole issue about, because all of us are wondering, we're speculating, what happens with James Bond after this next movie and Daniel Craig steps away? Could it be a Tom Hiddleston? Could it be an Idris Elba? Could it even be a woman? Well, Barbara weighed in on this herself, and this is what she had to say about it. She said, "He, James Bond, can be of any color, but he is male. I believe we should be creating new characters for women, strong female characters. I'm not particularly interested in taking a male character and having a woman play it. I think women are far more interesting than that." And that is a comment from Barbara Broccoli. And listen, I got to say, Rob, I am one of these people that I am totally okay with any person, obviously you're a right-fitting actor, but of a person of any race or whatever. I don't think James Bond has to be white. I don't think there's anything inherent in the DNA of the character of James Bond that says the character's got to be white. There's nothing about the character that suggests that. So I'm totally fine with that. I'm open to the idea of them making James Bond a female character if they wanted to. I've said that before. I'm open to it. But I think the better thing to do, I've always thought, as what she just said herself, would be to actually create new characters for women themselves to play rather than saying a hand-me-down. Oh, but here, now you can play Bond or something like that. So I think it's very interesting that Barbara came out and made these comments. Rob, as the resident big James Bond fan here, what did you make of these comments?
Well, first of all, I think she's absolutely right. I mean, the idea is James Bond is a literary character based on the work of Ian Fleming. He was written in a certain time to be a certain way by an author that created this character. And while we have seen all different kinds of permutations of characters that have had gender swapping and all that, I don't necessarily object to that. But also, this character was conceived to be a certain way. He's the work of an individual, of an artist, of an author. The same guy who wrote Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, by the way. and it's like, when do we stop? Is it disrespectful to the original? I mean, I know he's long dead, but why don't we allow James Bond to exist the way he was conceived? He's part of history. That said, Barbara Broccoli's put her money where her mouth is. She's made a movie called The Rhythm Section that stars Blake Lively. It's got Bond-esque. I mean, it's supposed to come out at the end of the month and nobody's talking about it. So she actually made a movie with a female protagonist based on another series of books. So she's not somebody who's just paying lip service. I'm sure somebody's going to get mad about her comments. But she actually went out and spent millions of dollars making a movie series about hopefully it'll be a series about a woman who becomes an operative starring Blake Lively. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of people who get angry, but I agree. I think this idea of gender swapping or race swapping does a disservice to people who weren't the race that the character began as or the gender, because that just says that we can't create new characters that they have their own race and their own gender baked into them. I mean, it's such a weird thing that we have this impulse that we want to change, that somehow changing the gender, changing the ethnic backgrounds of a character is somehow helpful. I would say no. We want to see new characters. We want to see characters that I want to see a black James Bond. I want to see Idris Elba as a secret agent because that would be badass. I love Idris Elba. He classes up the joint. I've loved him since he was Stringer Bell in The Wire. I love Idris Elba. So why not give him something new to do, that he plays to his strengths, that he can make a role that 50 years from now, people will talk about Idris Elba in the role the same way that they talk about Sean Connery playing James Bond. Whatever that new secret agent is that Idris Elba made so indelible he exists half a century later. Isn't that what we should be doing?
I don't know, man. I got to disagree with you on the whole thing about the race, particularly about the race thing. You know, my position in this has always been, unless, like, let's say Black Panther. Okay, it is inherent to the character itself that you have to have a black actor playing it. For sure, you do. But there are so many characters, when you really look at the DNA of the character, their race has nothing to do with who and what the character is. Because where do we draw the line? Like if we say, okay, here's this character, and really nothing about the character suggests that really the character should be white or black. If we draw a line there, then aren't we going to say, well, wait a minute, in the original book, this character was 5'9.5". This actor is 5'10.5". Are we going to say in the book the guy's eyes were blue? Well, that actor can't be it because his eyes are brown. Like to me, unless there's
by the way, they
something
said that about Daniel Craig, about his eye
they
color.
did, and I'm so glad that they shut them up because Daniel Craig turned out to be my all-time favorite James Bond. But I just think that unless there's something inherent in the character itself that really requires them to truly be that character, it's required that that character be Asian or Caucasian or black or however else, or Middle East, or whatever. Unless there's something inherently in the DNA of the character that requires the character to be that, I don't care if a character is 5'11" instead of 5'10". I don't care if the character's skin tone is darker or lighter. I don't care about any of that stuff, as long as it doesn't buck up against an important element about who that character is supposed to be. Well, and if it doesn't, then I'm all for it personally.
Look, I think what you just said, 100%. And one of those, the perfect example of that, one of my favorite novellas of all time was Stephen King's Rita Hayworth in Shawshank Redemption. And the main character, along with Andy Dufresne, is Red. And in the story, Red is a white dude. And in the movie, he's Morgan Freeman. Now, even as a lover of the story, and I used to read it every year at Christmas before the movie had come out, did it bother me that Morgan Freeman was black? Not at all. As a matter of fact, I can't even imagine the movie. I can't even read the story anymore without seeing Morgan Freeman as that character. And it's great because in the movie, Andy Dufresne says, why do they call you Red? And Morgan Freeman says, maybe it's because I'm Irish. You know, and they dealt with they dealt with the whole issue of race right then and there. And I'm like, I don't care. I think you're right. But, you know, the character of James Bond now has been around for over 50 years, since 1962 on the screen. And in the case of Bond in particular, I think it'd be a little odd. Not that I would mind. I mean, if Idris Elba was 36 years old, make him the new Bond. You know, I wouldn't have a problem with that. But what you're doing was like with a character that's been around for so long. But then again, I guess ultimately it really doesn't matter. But it just seems to me like when you're going to do it now, I mean, maybe you could make it different. But he is a British officer of the Navy, and he did come out of the Cold War. And I mean, there's just a lot about the Bond character that it's sort of baked in. But yeah, I agree with you. I don't really have a problem with anybody black or white. And I think I always use Shawshank Redemption as the primary example.
It's a great example.
But then it's like, why are you doing it now? Because it's fashionable, or does it serve the story? I always tell people, for me, it's always about the character and the story. It begins and ends there. And if you've got a reason, or maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe if you don't say anything about his color or her gender or whatever, and just go ahead and make it matter of fact, it'll work that way. I mean, they've swapped one of the main characters. They've done a gender swap in Dune. Denis Villeneuve's upcoming Dune, one of the characters, Dr. Kynes, was a man in the story. Now it's a woman. And I don't have a problem with that.
Right, but see, there's a difference, though, I think. There's a difference because I think you could have, theoretically, I'm not saying this is what they should do, I'm just saying theoretically, you could have Idris Elba playing James Bond. And I think he could embody everything that James Bond is in a badass way. But, you know how I was saying, like, hey, as long as it's not a core part of the DNA, I'm sorry. While I'm not against the idea, if they wanted to try something really radically different and have a female James Bond, I'm not against that per se. But at the DNA level of James Bond is unavoidably, inexcusably, and, beyond any debate is a male character. The core DNA essence of who and what James Bond is at its core, in its DNA, a male character. To change James Bond from white to black actually doesn't really change anything about the character. To change James Bond from a man to a woman, I think that fundamentally changes who and what the character is. A neat example, though, to go against my own argument, though, Rob, is if you look at something like Battlestar Galactica with Starbuck. Right. I mean, listen, I'm about to contradict my own statement, because when they switched to Katie Sackhoff as Starbuck, a lot of people went, wait a minute, and including me a little bit, like, Starbuck's a dude. And her Starbuck was fantastic. So that kind of contradicts my own argument. But there's exceptions to every rule. I just think James Bond is in his DNA a guy. I think when you look at all of his traits, he's inexcusably male. So I don't know, that's me.
But I think you just pointed something out by bringing up Starbuck, which is a great example. The creators of David Icke and Ron Moore, when they decided to reimagine Galactica, they had a vision for the character. And being all about authorship myself, if you have that kind of a vision, if you really have a reason and you think you can do something new, I thought the character, Katie Sackhoff Starbuck, was far better written and far more interesting than Dirk Benedict's Starbuck from the original Galactica. And that was, of course, she had 4 years to develop that character. I mean, she was one of, I think, if you go back and you look at television of the aughts, she's one of the great characters that was on TV.
Totally agree.
And I would never want to prevent a writer or a producer, if they've got a vision for a character and they can bring us something new and unique and they have a reason for doing it, by all means, go for it. I have no problem with that. What I hate is when people just do these things willy-nilly because it's fashionable at the time. That's what I don't like.
Question here is, guys, you hear the producer of James Bond saying, nah, we just can't see James Bond as a female character. Do you applaud that? Do you not like that? How do you guys feel about it? It's a touchy subject with a lot of people. I understand there's a lot of people that I'm sure agree with me, a lot of people that agree with Rob, a lot of people that probably disagree with both of us. But what do you guys think? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right.